Hey guys, welcome to NorthStar History, where we cut through the darkness of the night to uncover the events that still leave our world full of questions. Ready to travel back in time? Let's start. Not a single soul survived the wreck, they said, but in the black depths of the Florida Keys, where the sun's light is swallowed by the wreck's skeletal embrace, I saw something that whispered of a different fate. A brass key, tarnished but whole, clutched in the hand of a silver skeleton. The year of the King's War, 1778, Philadelphia. The air in Philadelphia was thick, not just with the humid summer heat, but with the suffocating tension of a revolution turning bloody. In the dimly lit back room of a popular tavern known as the Sign of the Blue Anchor, Captain Jeremiah the Gnat Graham traced a path on a stolen British Admiralty chart with a calloused finger. Graham, a lean, wiry man with eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic, was a commissioned privateer for the fledgling American cause, but his true loyalty was to the weight of a gold doubloon. His companion, Mr. Silas Thorne, was the antithesis of the dashing, if morally flexible, captain. Thorne was a meticulously dressed Boston merchant whose silks and powdered wig seemed entirely out of place amidst the reeking casks and rum-soaked tables. He was financing Graham's next venture, a gamble so audacious it was whispered about in the highest circles of the Continental Congress. "The HMS Resolution, Captain," Thorne hissed, leaning closer. The candlelight flickered on the ornate gold locket pinned to his waistcoat. "She is not merely a supply ship. The intelligence is solid. She carries the Crown's private war chest, intended to pay the Hessian mercenaries at Newport. Gold, silver, and enough letters of marque to sink our cause before it truly sails." Graham just smiled, a thin, predatory curve of his lips. "Washington can keep his Madeira, Mr. Thorne. I'll take the gold. The Resolution is a lumbering cow, and my brigantine, the Venture, can outrun any frigate they send. But the route, it's too crowded." "That is why you will not sail north," Thorne countered, tapping a spot on the chart far to the south, right where the jagged teeth of the Florida Keys began. "You will sail a southerly course, a feint. Once you are past the British naval base in Jamaica, you will follow the old Spanish trade channel." Graham's eyes narrowed, a shadow of genuine unease crossing his face. The Keys, a labyrinth of coral reefs and shallow shifting sands, were the domain of something far older and more dangerous than the British Navy. They were the last redoubt of the true pirates, men who owed allegiance to no flag but the skull and crossbones. The pirates, Thorne. Jean Lafitte's men are still there, in the swamps of Louisiana, and his ilk are everywhere in the Keys. They prey on wreckers and privateers alike. If I'm to run that gauntlet, I need insurance. Thorne opened a small leather-bound pouch and slid a heavy engraved silver signet ring across the table. It bore the image of a coiled serpent wrapped around an anchor. "This is not insurance, Captain. This is a promise. It is the mark of a secret organization, a brotherhood. They control the flow of all illegal goods from Havana to Charleston. Flash this ring to any man wearing a matching bronze pin, and you have their protection in the Keys. They value discretion and coin above all else." Graham picked up the ring, its cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of the room. He slipped it onto his smallest finger. "A secret society, always a dangerous dance, Thorne." A moment of silence passed between them, heavy with unspoken risk. Thorne's expression became utterly devoid of emotion, a mask carved from ice. "His name is Elias Vance. He is not a sailor, but a cartographer, an intelligence man. He will report only to me, and he will ensure the gold reaches its intended destination, Newport. Do not trust him, Captain. Do not defy him. He is the Crown's worst nightmare, and your most vital asset." Not a single soul survived the wreck, they said. But in the black depths of the Florida Keys, where the sun's light is swallowed by the wreck's skeletal embrace, I saw something that whispered of a different fate. A brass key, tarnished but whole, clutched in the hand of a silver skeleton. The year of the King's War, 1778, Philadelphia. The air in Philadelphia was thick, not just with the humid summer heat, but with the suffocating tension of a revolution turning bloody. In the dimly lit back room of a popular tavern known as the Sign of the Blue Anchor, Captain Jeremiah, the Gnat, Graham, traced a path on a stolen British Admiralty chart with a calloused finger. Graham, a lean, wiry man with eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic, was a commissioned privateer for the fledgling American cause, but his true loyalty was to the weight of a gold doubloon. His companion, Mr. Silas Thorne, was the antithesis of the dashing, if morally flexible, captain. Thorne was a meticulously dressed Boston merchant whose silks and powdered wigs seemed entirely out of place amidst the reeking casks and rum-soaked tables. He was financing Graham's next venture, a gamble so audacious it was whispered about in the highest circles of the Continental Congress. "The HMS Resolution, Captain," Thorne hissed, leaning closer. The candlelight flickered on the ornate gold locket pinned to his waistcoat. "She is not merely a supply ship. The intelligence is solid. She carries the Crown's private war chest, intended to pay the Hessian mercenaries at Newport. Gold, silver, and enough letters of marque to sink our cause before it truly sails." Graham just smiled, a thin, predatory curve of his lips. "Washington can keep his Madeira, Mr. Thorne. I'll take the gold. The Resolution is a lumbering cow, and my brigantine, the Venture, can outrun any frigate they send. But the route, it's too crowded." "That is why you will not sail north," Thorne countered, tapping a spot on the chart far to the south, right where the jagged teeth of the Florida Keys began. "You will sail a southerly course, a feint. Once you are past the British naval base in Jamaica, you will follow the old Spanish trade channel." Graham's eyes narrowed, a shadow of genuine unease crossing his face. The Keys, a labyrinth of coral reefs and shallow shifting sands, were the domain of something far older and more dangerous than the British Navy. They were the last redoubt of the true pirates, men who owed allegiance to no flag but the skull and crossbones. The pirates, Thorne. John Lafitte's men are still there, in the swamps of Louisiana, and his ilk are everywhere in the Keys. They prey on wreckers and privateers alike. If I'm to run that gauntlet, I need insurance. Thorne opened a small leather-bound pouch and slid a heavy engraved silver signet ring across the table. It bore the image of a coiled serpent wrapped around an anchor. "This is not insurance, Captain. This is a promise. It is the mark of a secret organization, a brotherhood. They control the flow of all illegal goods from Havana to Charleston. Flash this ring to any man wearing a matching bronze pin, and you have their protection in the Keys. They value discretion and coin above all else." Graham picked up the ring, its cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of the room. He slipped it onto his smallest finger. "A secret society. Always a dangerous dance, Thorne." A moment of silence passed between them, heavy with unspoken risk. Thorne's expression became utterly devoid of emotion, a mask carved from ice. His name is Elias Vance. He is not a sailor, but a cartographer, an intelligence man. He will report only to me, and he will ensure the gold reaches its intended destination, Newport. Do not trust him, Captain. Do not defy him. He is the Crown's worst nightmare and your most vital asset. অবশ্যই, এখানে গল্পের তৃতীয় অংশটি শুরু করা যাক, যেখানে ক্যাপ্টেন গ্রাহাম এবং জলদস্যু রোজাসের মধ্যে একটি অপ্রত্যাশিত সংঘর্ষ দেখা দেবে। সাবধান, দ্য লাস্ট পাইরেট সিক্রেট, পার্ট 3, দ্য সার্পেন্ট অ্যান্ড দ্য বুচার। Captain Graham, known as the Gnat for his speed and cunning, knew they couldn't outrun the 3 fast-moving pirate sloops in the shallow inner cut. The surrounding reefs meant maneuverability was nil. His only advantage was the 2 forward-facing carronades on the Venture and the element of surprise that was now gone. Graham roared, gripping the helm. "Vance, you useless scholar, get below." Vance remained coolly at the captain's side, his eyes scanning the surrounding mangroves, not the approaching ships. "Captain, a naval battle in this channel is suicide. The shifting sands will snag the hull, and Rojas knows that." He spat. "No, Captain," Vance insisted, pointing at the Spanish galleon, La Reina. "They've already sunk that ship. They were busy looting it when we arrived. They are after us because we are witnesses." Graham, seeing no other option, barked orders to fire. The Venture's carronades belched smoke and iron, but the quick, low sloops expertly dodged the shot. The pirates returned fire with swivel guns, tearing holes in the Venture's rigging. As Rojas's lead sloop, the Bloody Talon, drew close, grappling hooks flew, biting into the Venture's rails. The battle descended instantly into brutal close-quarters combat. The silver ring and the secret sign. Manuel, the butcher, a hulking figure with a reputation that curdled the blood, was the first man over the rail. He was magnificent and terrifying, a man bred for violence. He cut down 2 of Graham's sailors before the captain could reach him. Rojas bellowed, his voice echoing over the clash of steel. "You strayed too far from your American masters, little bug." Graham raised his cutlass, but before the swords could meet, Elias Vance moved. He stepped calmly between the 2 men, an act of sheer madness. "Captain Rojas," Vance said in flawless, unaccented Spanish, his voice carrying an unexpected authority. Rojas froze, his enormous cutlass hovering mere inches from Vance's throat. His eyes, dark and ruthless, narrowed, calculating. "Who are you, pescado?" Vance ignored the insult. He simply nodded towards Captain Graham. Graham, still reeling from the sudden intervention, felt Vance's hand push his own, forcing his left fist, the one bearing the heavy silver signet ring, into Rojas's line of sight. The ring, the coiled serpent wrapped around an anchor, glinted in the sunlight. Rojas's reaction was immediate and shocking. The butcher's rage drained from his face, replaced by a deep, cold fear. He looked not at the ring itself, but at the subtle, practiced way Vance had presented it, a specific, swift turn of the wrist. It wasn't just a sign of the secret brotherhood, it was a command signal. Rojas slowly, reluctantly lowered his cutlass. He spat on the deck. "The serpent's mark." He turned to his men, still grappling with Graham's crew. "Stand down, basta." The fighting ceased as abruptly as it began. The pirates, though clearly confused and angry, obeyed their captain instantly. The price of protection. Rojas turned back to Vance, his anger replaced by a chilling respect. "You have the edict, hermano," he growled, "but I still demand tribute for my time. You violated my hunting grounds." Vance stepped forward, not an ounce of fear in his posture. "We are carrying the Philadelphia gift. The cargo is not for trade, Captain. It is destined for the North." Rojas's eyes gleamed at the mention of the gold, but he kept his distance. The edict must be respected, but the serpent extracts its price in kind. He gestured towards the massive sinking Spanish galleon. That queen was barren, empty. He pointed to a small hidden cove where a group of pirates were frantically loading small, heavy chests onto one of the sloops. "This is our tribute," Rojas declared, his voice hard. "You will transport one of our own men and this cargo north, far from the Keys, until you reach the safety of the Carolinas. Deliver him and the chests to the specified coordinates. Then you are free to proceed with your own cargo." Graham was furious, but the silver ring on his hand was now a chain. He had to sail with a pirate and his contraband to deliver the Crown's war chest to the Americans. It was a bizarre, dangerous twist of fate orchestrated by the man who claimed to be a simple cartographer. The terms were set, the truce established, a fragile agreement enforced by the invisible hand of the Serpent Brotherhood. Captain Graham found himself in the most precarious position of his privateering career, sailing with a pirate cargo and, worse, a pirate passenger. The new passenger, a silent threat. The pirate selected for the northbound passage was not one of Rojas's cutthroat main crew, but a brooding, muscular man known only as Mateo. Mateo was taciturn, his eyes perpetually hooded, watching every move of the Venture's crew. His primary duty was to guard the 4 heavy iron-bound chests that were now stowed directly beside the American gold in the Venture's hold. Graham confronted Vance in the privacy of his cabin, the chart spread out before them like evidence in a crime. Graham hissed, slamming his fist on the table. "We are carrying pirate contraband. If the Royal Navy catches us, they won't even wait for a trial. We'll swing from the yardarm." Vance remained unmoved, tracing the line of the Florida current on the chart. "The Royal Navy, Captain, rarely patrols this deep in the Keys, and even less frequently ventures into the Gulf Stream itself. They prefer the safety of the coast. The Serpent Brotherhood ensures their activities remain hidden by utilizing the fastest route north, the current. It's the only way to outrun anything and anyone. As for Mateo, he is just ballast. The pirate's gold is worthless to us," Graham demanded. Vance finally looked at him, and his green eyes held a cold, analytical brilliance. "Rojas cannot risk his own men carrying such a blatant cargo of unrefined silver and artifacts from a sunk Spanish vessel into American waters. It would reveal his presence and his lucrative business of wrecking, a term for sinking ships to steal their cargo. We are the perfect cover. An American privateer, officially sailing to deliver aid." Graham felt a wave of icy realization. "We are being used as a mule." "Precisely, Captain. The Serpent Brotherhood is a master of compartmentalization and plausible deniability." Through the eye of the current. For the next week, the Venture sailed a grueling course along the edge of the Bahama Bank, utilizing the incredible push of the Florida current, the powerful river of warm water rushing north towards the Atlantic. The sea was volatile, but the speed was exhilarating. They were flying past the American coastline. Graham, however, noticed peculiar behavior from his new passenger, Mateo. The pirate was constantly, meticulously checking the stowed chests in the hold. He didn't just check the locks, he would rap on the iron plating, listening to the sound, and then would make small, almost imperceptible adjustments to the way the chests were braced against the hull. One night, under the deep cloak of a moonless sky, Graham watched Mateo slip into the hold. The captain followed silently, concealing himself behind a stack of powder kegs. Mateo did not open the chests. Instead, he pulled out a small, crudely made brass plate from his boot and began to polish it with a dark, oily rag. As he polished, the brass caught the faint light filtering from the deck hatch. Graham recognized the faint, etched pattern on the plate. It was a series of coordinates, but in a sequence that made no navigational sense. A cipher. Mateo then took a small, unmarked vial of clear liquid from his pouch. He carefully dripped a few drops onto the iron hinges of one of the chests. The iron sizzled almost silently, and a strange metallic-smelling smoke rose. It wasn't just a pirate cargo they were carrying. It was something designed to be destroyed or disappeared, something that left no trace. The iron chests, Graham suspected, were not merely holding stolen goods. They were a meticulously crafted device. Graham needed to know what was in those chests and where Mateo was truly headed. He remembered Thorne's initial instruction. The gold must reach its intended destination, Newport. He also remembered Vance's words, "The cargo is not for trade." That night, as the Venture was being violently rocked by the Gulf Stream, Graham approached Vance again. "The coordinates on Rojas's brass plate," Graham said, cutting straight to the point. Vance sighed, turning from the chart. "They mean, Captain, that the pirate cargo is not going to the Carolinas as promised. The cargo is a diversion. Then he disappears, the chests disappear, and the Serpent Brotherhood's involvement remains a phantom story, just as it was meant to be." Graham leaned close, his voice a low growl. "And what if I don't let Mateo get away with his diversion?" Vance looked at him, his face stern. "You cannot, Captain, because those 4 chests are not filled with silver. They are filled with something far more dangerous. If you interfere with Mateo's mission, you risk more than just your life." The journey along the Gulf Stream was now a race against time and a test of nerve. Captain Graham knew he had to uncover the truth about Mateo's cargo before they reached the drop-off point near Wilmington. His loyalty to the American cause and his own survival depended on it. The midnight deception. Graham decided on a bold strategy, a calculated risk to draw Mateo out. He ordered his first mate to simulate a sudden violent storm squall, a controlled chaos on deck designed to force all hands, including Mateo, to secure the rigging. Around 2 a.m., the crew began their noisy act, shouting about snapping lines and shifting winds. Mateo, ever watchful, sprang onto the deck to observe the supposed danger, leaving his post at the hold momentarily unattended. This was Graham's chance. He signaled to Vance, who was waiting by the main hatch. "Keep him distracted, Vance." Vance nodded grimly and approached the pirate, speaking in a measured, calm voice. "The Gulf Stream is unpredictable tonight, Mateo. A rogue current could push us 100 miles off course." The distraction bought Graham precious minutes. He slipped below deck, his heart hammering against his ribs. He carried a small, specialized brass pick, a tool he had learned to use during his less-than-legal trading days. He quickly reached the 4 iron-bound chests. The locks were heavy, but not complex. He worked with the practiced speed of a master thief, and within 90 seconds, the first lock clicked open. The true cargo. Graham lifted the heavy lid, expecting to see silver bars, or perhaps even stolen jewelry from the Spanish galleon. Instead, he saw layer upon layer of tightly packed oil-soaked canvas. As he pulled the canvas back, the true, horrifying contents of the chest were revealed. Small, cylindrical earthenware jars packed tightly with fine, gray gunpowder. Wicks and fuses meticulously coiled and treated to burn at specific rates. Several sealed glass vials containing a thick, dark, syrupy liquid, a terrifyingly potent form of Greek fire, or possibly nitroglycerin, known for its instability. This was not trade goods. This was military-grade incendiary ordnance, primitive yet devastating bombs, and there were 3 more chests just like it. But the most disturbing discovery was a stack of official-looking English naval documents sealed in oilskin. Graham carefully broke the seal on the top document. It was a detailed map of the port facilities of Charleston, South Carolina, overlaid with 3 circles marking key strategic targets: the main gunpowder magazine, the naval dockyards, and the customs house. The coordinates etched into the brass plate Mateo polished were not for a drop-off point. They were the timing codes for ignition. Graham's hands trembled. This was not a diversion. It was an act of state terrorism. The Serpent Brotherhood was not simply moving contraband. They were executing a complex, covert operation to cripple the American supply lines. He quickly resealed the chest, locked it, and hurried back on deck, his mind reeling. The Serpent's true aim. He found Vance waiting for him, his face pale beneath the moonlight. "He's coming," Vance whispered, gesturing toward the forward mast. Graham pulled Vance away from the listening distance of the crew. "Vance, those chests are not silver, they're firebombs." Vance closed his eyes, a flicker of pain or perhaps regret crossing his face. "I suspected. That is why I knew you couldn't interfere. This mission is far larger than a simple pirate scheme. If Charleston burns, the American cause in the South collapses instantly. The Hessians in Newport, the ones who need the gold from the Resolution, will be irrelevant." Graham demanded, his voice dangerously low. "No," Vance said emphatically. "They work for the destruction of stability. They thrive on chaos. If America wins, trade becomes regulated. If Britain dominates completely, trade becomes regulated. But a prolonged, grinding war? That creates the perfect environment for smuggling, wrecking, and black market gold." Just then, Mateo returned, his face a mask of suspicion. He saw the captain and the cartographer huddled together. "Mateo?" asked, his voice rough. "The air is calm now." His eyes darted to the secured hatch of the hold. "I returned to my post." Graham met the pirate's gaze, his fear replaced by cold resolve. He had to stop Mateo before the sun rose. The fate of the South, and possibly the entire revolution, rested on the fate of those 4 iron chests. Captain Graham knew he couldn't wait until they reached the drop-off point near Wilmington. Mateo was not a mere guard. He was an executioner, carrying 4 deadly instruments of war. The attack on Charleston was imminent, and Graham's gold, the king's war chest, was meant to be the perfect decoy. The midnight confrontation. Graham gathered the most loyal core of his crew, men hardened by revolution, not piracy, and outlined his desperate plan. He would confront Mateo as the venture entered a particularly rough patch of the Gulf Stream, using the chaos of the sea as cover. Just before dawn, as the brigantine pitched violently in the massive swells of the current, Graham signaled his men. He descended into the hold, a primed flintlock pistol in his hand. Mateo was exactly where Graham expected him to be, standing guard over the 4 iron chests, polishing the brass coordinates plate under the faint glow of a bullseye lantern. "Mateo," Graham called out, his voice sharp and steady over the roar of the hull. "Your watch is over." Mateo slowly turned, his eyes holding the cold, dead look of a man who kills without emotion. He recognized the pistol and the captain's tone. "The edict protects me, Captain Graham," Mateo said, his Spanish heavily accented. "The Serpent does not allow its agents to be harmed." "The contract is null, hermano," Graham countered, cocking the pistol. "I have seen the contents of those chests. This is not trade. This is an act of war against my nation, and it is a betrayal of the very chaos your brotherhood claims to serve." Mateo's thin lips curled into a cold smile. "You think too highly of your nation, Captain. The Serpent serves the gold. Charleston's destruction will flood the black market with enough arms and desperate men to feed the war machine for a decade. It is profitable." Mateo lunged not for Graham, but for the chests. He intended to trigger the explosive liquid vials immediately, sinking the ship and destroying the evidence, a final self-destructive act of loyalty. Vance's true loyalty. The flash of the pistol's discharge was brief and deafening in the cramped space. Graham didn't shoot to kill, he shot to disable. The ball shattered the bullseye lantern, plunging the hold into absolute darkness. Mateo roared in frustration and pain. Graham's loyal crew, led by his first mate, swarmed the hold. The brief but brutal fight ended when Mateo was pinned against the barrels. "Tie him," Graham ordered. He then grabbed the lantern and stumbled up to the deck, searching for Vance. He found Vance at the helm, his face calm, expertly navigating the ship through the pitching current. "You knew what was in those chests, Vance," Graham accused, leveling the pistol at the cartographer. "You said the Serpent wanted a long war, but you didn't stop him." Vance met his gaze, unflinching. "My true loyalty, Captain, is to Silas Thorne." Vance stepped away from the helm and pointed to the silver signet ring on Graham's finger. "The Serpent Brotherhood is a hydra. You cut off one head, two more grow." Thorne created the Safe Passage Edict not to protect Rojas, but to control him. The gold from the resolution must reach Washington. Graham realized, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "I was ensuring that the Charleston plot was exposed at the right moment," Vance clarified. "If you had interfered earlier, Rojas would have suspected betrayal. Now, with Mateo captured and the bombs neutralized, we have something far more valuable than gold: intelligence. The new target." Vance pointed the Venture's bow sharply west, away from the northbound current. "The moment we secured those bombs, our mission changed. We must now sail to the closest friendly port. We must deliver Mateo and the evidence," Graham asked, holstering the pistol. "We cannot go to Charleston. It's too risky. We are going to New Bern, North Carolina. It is a small, quiet port, but it is the seat of the newly formed Continental Army Intelligence Cell for the South. It will be safer there, under military guard, than floating towards Newport in the Gulf Stream," Vance said. "We have the gold. We have the proof." As the sun finally broke over the horizon, turning the turbulent sea of brilliant gold, the Venture turned its back on the deadly current and headed for the coast. The Revolutionary War just got a whole lot dirtier, and Captain Jeremiah Graham, the greedy privateer, had accidentally become a hero, holding the key to a global conspiracy. The voyage to New Bern, North Carolina, was agonizingly slow, a sharp contrast to the furious speed of the Gulf Stream. The Venture hugged the coast, battling contrary winds. Graham and Vance maintained a tense vigilance, knowing that Mateo's silence was more dangerous than any roar. The captured pirate, strapped to the main mast below deck, refused to speak, a chilling monument to the Serpent's code of Omerta. The arrival at New Bern. New Bern, situated at the confluence of the Trent and Neuse rivers, was a sleepy, unassuming port, still recovering from a skirmish with the British. It was the perfect place for a secretive military intelligence cell. Upon docking, Graham and Vance left the precious cargo, the King's war chest and the 4 iron chests of bombs, under heavy guard. They proceeded immediately to the designated meeting point, a small, unassuming dry goods store that served as a front for the Continental Army's intelligence operations. They were met by a man known only as Major Hawthorne. Hawthorne was not the typical boisterous officer. He was a small, intense man whose civilian clothes hid a sharp military discipline. His reputation preceded him. He was Washington's most trusted agent for covert operations in the southern colonies. Hawthorne listened in absolute silence, his fingers steepled under his chin. "The King's war chest is invaluable, Captain Graham," Hawthorne finally said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "It will fund the entire next phase of the war." Then his gaze turned to Vance, becoming cold and penetrating. "But the intelligence, Mr. Vance, is the true treasure. You claim the Serpent Brotherhood is working to prolong the war for profit. You claim your employer, Mr. "That is correct, Major," Vance replied calmly. Thorne is the highest-ranking American asset within the Brotherhood. The unsettling realization. Hawthorne ordered the 4 iron chests of bombs and the captive Mateo to be brought ashore under maximum security. When the chests were opened and the map of Charleston was laid out, Hawthorne studied the coordinates etched onto Mateo's brass plate. "These coordinates," Hawthorne said, tracing the lines on the map, "they are not just timing codes for the explosives, they are also rendezvous points." Hawthorne then produced a document of his own, a recent dispatch detailing a successful British raid on American supply lines in Virginia. At the bottom of the dispatch was a small, crudely drawn insignia, a coiled serpent wrapped around an anchor. "The Serpent Brotherhood," Hawthorne explained grimly, "is not merely a smuggling ring. It is a shadow government operating on both sides of the war." He pointed to the insignia. "This dispatch detailing the Virginia raid, we now believe it was intentionally leaked by the Brotherhood to destabilize our logistics. The key to the conspiracy." Hawthorne then turned to the most crucial piece of evidence, the silver signet ring that Graham still wore. "Mr. Vance," Hawthorne challenged, "you identified the key to this conspiracy as Silas Thorne, the man who gave this ring to Captain Graham." Vance hesitated for the first time. "It is the mark of the Grand Master of the American chapter of the Brotherhood." Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "The ring is a symbol of power, yes, but it is also a key." He looked directly at Captain Graham. "Captain, the King's war chest you carried was merely bait. The real treasure of your mission was never the gold, but the proof, the iron chests, and this ring." Hawthorne then dropped his voice to a whisper. "We have secured the gold. We have the bombs. Now we must hunt the Grand Master. Silas Thorne must be found. He knows the ledger's location." The war, Graham realized, was no longer fought with muskets and cannons, but with deception, shadowy alliances, and a deadly silver key. Major Hawthorne's intelligence was precise and ruthless. The Serpent Brotherhood was not just a criminal enterprise, it was a transnational network whose reach extended into the highest echelons of both the British and American governments. The only way to truly dismantle it was to seize the Serpent's ledger, the book containing the identities of every operative and the coordinates of their hidden caches. The new assignment. Hawthorne presented Graham and Vance with their new orders. The King's war chest was now safely under Continental Army guard in New Bern. The bombs were defused, and Mateo was being interrogated, though still silent. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the source of the plague remained. Silas Thorne knew the plan, Hawthorne explained in the dimly lit storehouse. He knew the Resolution's gold would draw Rojas, and he knew the bombs were the true objective. But his goal was to expose the plot, not to deliver the gold itself. "Thorne is the Grand Master," Vance noted. "He will have activated his emergency extraction protocol," Graham asked. "The ghost town," Vance replied, his voice barely a whisper. "A Brotherhood stronghold that exists only on their secret charts." Hawthorne slid a small, rolled-up, tightly sealed map across the table. "This map uses the same cipher as the coordinates on the bomb plate, Captain. Mr. Vance can decode it." "It points to Providence, Rhode Island, the last known connection to Thorne's shipping network before he disappears completely. You must sail north, as fast as the Venture can carry you." The journey north and the decoy. The Venture turned its bow north, battling the ferocious North Atlantic currents, but this journey was different. They were no longer running from the British or the pirates. They were hunting a ghost, the man who had been their benefactor, their controller, and the key to the entire war's secrets. During the long days at sea, Vance worked tirelessly to decipher the Brotherhood's cipher on the map. Thorne is a master of misdirection, Vance explained to Graham. The map points to Providence, but that's a decoy. Vance ultimately cracked the code, revealing the true location, Block Island, a remote, rugged outcrop of rock and sand off the Rhode Island coast, notorious for its shipwrecks and isolation. The ghost town is located in the hidden, landlocked cove on the eastern side of Block Island, Vance stated, pointing to a small hand-drawn symbol on the map that looked like a tarnished brass key. The secret of the Silver Key. As they neared the New England coast, Graham, restless and mistrustful, returned to the one piece of evidence that had started it all, the silver signet ring. He took it off and examined it closely. It was heavy, its silver tarnished with age, and the coiled serpent was intricately carved. "Vance," Graham said, holding out the ring, "you said this was a key." Vance reached out, taking the ring with reverence. He pressed a specific point on the serpent's head, and with a faint click, the ring sprang open. It was not solid. It was a miniature, hollow container. Inside the tiny space lay a single, almost invisible object, a micro-etched steel filing, no larger than a splinter. The ledger is protected by an incredibly complex lock, likely a Spanish design. The lock has only one specific tumbler that can be lifted by this filing. Lose this, and the ledger is sealed forever. "He trusted me to be his patsy," Graham corrected bitterly. As they sailed past the familiar coastline of Rhode Island, a thick, unnatural fog rolled in, enveloping the Venture. The air grew heavy, and the scent of salt mixed with something metallic, something that smelled like old cannon smoke. Suddenly, a cry came from the crow's nest. "Sail dead ahead! A British frigate, Captain!" Graham cursed. The frigate, the HMS Vengeance, was known for its ruthless patrols. It was heading directly for them, guns trained. It was an interception too precise to be random. The Serpent Brotherhood knew we were coming, Graham realized, his voice tight. Thorne anticipated that Hawthorne would send us after him. The frigate is not patrolling, it is waiting for us. The sudden appearance of the British frigate, the HMS Vengeance, confirmed Graham's fears. Silas Thorne had anticipated their pursuit. The Serpent Brotherhood had set a deadly snare, using the might of the Royal Navy to eliminate the captain and cartographer before they could reach the ledger. The duel in the fog. The dense coastal fog, which had initially been a hindrance, now became Graham's only ally. The Vengeance, a massive ship of the line, was built for brute force, not for agility in the treacherous rocky waters off the New England coast. The Venture, in contrast, was a swift, shallow-draft brigantine, the perfect escape vessel. "Vance, your charts!" Graham yelled over the wind, taking the helm. "It's too dangerous, Captain," Vance argued, his face tight with adrenaline. Graham snapped. He pointed to the deciphered map of Block Island. "Thorne's decoy route leads through the Devil's Teeth, a cluster of submerged granite spires. It's suicide for a frigate, but we might just skim past." Graham began a terrifying maneuver, sailing the Venture directly into the densest part of the fog and the deadliest stretch of water. The Vengeance immediately opened fire. Cannonballs whistled past the Venture's mast, showering the deck with splintered wood. The crew was terrified, but Graham's sailing skill was unmatched. He used every gust of wind and every eddy of the tide, trusting the Serpent's coiled route that Vance had decoded. The Venture skipped over reefs, leaving the thunderous sounds of British cannon fire struggling to keep pace behind them. Then they heard a terrifying, grating sound, followed by a sickening crunch. The Vengeance had run aground. The mighty frigate was pinned, helpless, on the granite spikes of the Devil's Teeth. The Serpent's trap had swallowed the wrong victim. The ghost town entrance. As the venture finally broke through the fog, they found themselves in the clear, cold light of a late autumn morning, just off the sheer cliffs of Block Island. Vance consulted the final coordinates on the map, focusing on the small brass key symbol. The entrance is a hidden cove on the eastern flank. It is perfectly concealed by rock formations and only accessible at high tide. Graham brought the venture perilously close to the cliff face. A cascade of water poured down from a narrow fissure in the rock, the tide-driven outflow of the cove. "If there's an entrance, there's a guard," Graham cautioned. "Ready the muskets." They found the entrance, a natural, arching tunnel barely wide enough for the brigantine. As the venture slipped into the darkness, the sound of the sea vanished. The air grew suddenly warm and stagnant, smelling of old rum and decaying wood. The Brand Master's sanctuary. The tunnel opened into a large hidden lagoon. This was the ghost town. It was a perfectly natural cove, surrounded by high cliffs, completely invisible from the sea. But nestled along the water's edge was a small, well-maintained village. A handful of stone buildings, a sturdy deep-water dock, and a watchtower carved into the cliff face. It was deserted, eerily quiet. "It's a bolt hole," Graham whispered, gripping his pistol. They tied the venture to the dock and moved towards the largest structure, a squat, heavily fortified stone warehouse near the center of the camp. This building, they realized, was the heart of the ghost town. "The ledger will be inside," Vance confirmed, drawing his own sidearm. They approached the door, which was reinforced with thick oak and iron banding. Set into the stone frame was a complex 5-tumbler lock, precisely the kind of Spanish mechanism Vance had described. Beside the lock was a small circular indentation, clearly meant for an ornate key. Graham took the silver signet ring from his finger, carefully extracting the tiny steel filing from the hollow space within. "Thorne is inside," Graham said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's waiting for us, Vance." He inserted the tiny filing into the lock and, with agonizing slowness and precision, manipulated the complex tumblers. The lock clicked, then groaned. The final obstacle to the Serpent's secrets had been overcome. The heavy oak door of the fortified stone warehouse groaned open, revealing a large, high-ceilinged room illuminated by a single powerful whale oil lantern suspended above a sturdy central table. The room was not empty. Silas Thorne sat calmly at the table. He was no longer the fastidious Boston merchant. His silk waistcoat was replaced by practical, dark woolen clothes, and a short-barreled pistol lay within easy reach on the table. He was impeccably prepared, his expression a mixture of cool appraisal and wry disappointment. "Jeremiah, Elias, I confess I am surprised," Thorne said, his voice smooth and devoid of any panic. "I gave the British precise coordinates for your sinking. You are either astonishingly lucky or remarkably clever." The Grand Master's confession. Graham didn't lower his pistol. "The British found the devil's teeth, Thorne, not the venture. You trusted your own cipher too much." Graham pointed the pistol at the table. "The ledger, Thorne, where is it?" Thorne sighed, gesturing dismissively towards a heavy leather-bound volume resting beside his pistol. It was the Serpent's ledger. "The ledger is right here, Captain, and I did not try to burn Charleston, Jeremiah." Graham was confused. "What are you talking about?" Thorne leaned back, a dark intensity in his eyes. "The Serpent Brotherhood's true Grand Master is not me, Captain. It is Lord Cornwallis's chief financial advisor in London." He looked at Vance. Elias knew the truth. Vance stepped forward, lowering his own weapon. "The Charleston plot was very real, Captain, but it wasn't the Serpent's main goal." Thorne continued, his voice hardening. "The gold on the HMS Resolution, the King's war chest, was far too large, too obvious. It was a decoy to distract the Continental Congress. The ultimate betrayal." Thorne grabbed the ledger and flipped it open to a marked page. "This ledger records the real mission. The Resolution's gold was to be seized, yes, but the Charleston bombs were simply a loud distraction to pull Washington's few southern resources away from a northern port assault. Graham asked, his mind reeling from the scale of the deception. "Why give me the ring?" "Because you were the perfect instrument," Thorne admitted, a flicker of regret in his eyes. "I gave you the ring to give you immunity from Rojas, ensuring you survive the keys. I gave you the intelligence on the Charleston plot because it was a false flag that I needed to be exposed." Thorne pointed the short-barreled pistol, not at Graham, but at his own chest. "I could not deliver the ledger directly to Hawthorne. I would have been exposed as the Grand Master of the American chapter, and the Serpent Brotherhood would have killed me and the ledger before I reached shore," Graham questioned, his voice shaking. "The ledger is protected," Thorne said simply, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It records all the Serpent's secrets, yes, but it also records my own crimes. If I am captured, I am leveraged against America." Thorne's last words were a choked whisper, filled with the tragic weight of his sacrifice. "Take the ledger, Jeremiah. Deliver it to Washington. You are a hero, Captain." The Serpent's legacy. The sound of the pistol shot echoed deafeningly in the stone chamber. Silas Thorne fell, the ledger sliding from his grasp onto the floor. Graham and Vance rushed forward, but it was too late. Thorne, the ultimate double agent, had paid the ultimate price to secure the ledger. Graham picked up the heavy book. It was cold to the touch, and as he opened it, the pages revealed columns of names, dates, coordinates, and codes. The entire network of the Serpent Brotherhood laid bare. It was the most destructive intelligence document of the entire Revolutionary War. Vance placed a hand on Graham's shoulder, his own face etched with grief. "We have the ledger, Captain. We must leave now." Graham looked down at the lifeless body of the man who had manipulated him, endangered him, and ultimately died for the cause. He hadn't sought glory or heroism, but he had found the key to both. He was the man who had exposed the serpent in the heart of the American Revolution. They turned and left the ghost town, the ledger tucked safely under Graham's arm. The war was far from over, but the secrets that had fueled it were now in the hands of the revolution. Captain Jeremiah Graham and Elias Vance sailed the Venture south from Block Island with the Serpent's ledger, the Book of Treason, secured in the captain's private safe. The journey was tense and shadowed by fear of reprisal, but the Serpent's Brotherhood, crippled by the death of its American master, Silas Thorne, and the exposure of its bomb plot, was already reeling. The ledger's legacy. The Venture finally put into port in New London, Connecticut, where Vance made contact with Major Hawthorne's northern cell. The Serpent's ledger was immediately delivered to General George Washington himself. The impact was cataclysmic. Within weeks, Washington's intelligence network, using the names and codes from the ledger, exposed and neutralized dozens of high-ranking British spies masquerading as loyal colonists, wealthy merchants, and even minor officials in the Continental Army. More importantly, the ledger revealed the identities of several British financiers who were funneling funds to Hessian mercenaries. The exposed conspiracy led to a series of arrests and seizures, severely disrupting the British war effort throughout 1779 and 1780. The King's war chest, which Graham had successfully brought ashore, was quickly deployed to pay and equip Washington's starving troops, providing a crucial morale boost and logistical lifeline. The American cause had survived the Serpent's attempt to destroy it from within, thanks to the ultimate sacrifice of the double agent, Silas Thorne, and the unlikely heroics of a greedy privateer. The fate of the privateer. Jeremiah the Gnat Graham was summoned to Washington's temporary headquarters in New Jersey. The general, a man known for his towering presence and stern demeanor, received Graham with unusual warmth. Washington offered Graham a commission as a captain in the new Continental Navy and a handsome reward for the recovery of the war chest and the ledger. But Graham, the man who thrived on independence and the thrill of the chase, declined both the commission and the majority of the reward. He was a creature of the sea, not a soldier of the line. "General," Graham said, standing stiffly before the commander-in-chief, "I came into this for gold, and I came out with a conscience. The gold is yours to win the war. I only ask for enough to repair my ship and a full pardon for any—" Washington granted his request. The story of the Serpent's Ledger, the ghost town, and Thorne's sacrifice was deemed too dangerous for public consumption. It was a victory won in the shadows and buried in secret war records, ensuring that Silas Thorne died a traitor in the eyes of the British, thus protecting the ledger's legitimacy. Graham's final reward was a full letter of marque under the American flag, legally authorizing him to continue his privateering. He took his small share of gold, refurbished the venture, and sailed back out to the Atlantic. The last pirate. Elias Vance, the mysterious cartographer, was immediately absorbed into Washington's high-level intelligence staff, his expertise in cipher and covert networks proving invaluable. He was last known to be working on a new set of naval charts for the nascent Continental Navy, charts that incorporated all the hidden knowledge of the Florida Keys and the Serpent's secret lanes. Captain Jeremiah Graham, meanwhile, returned to the sea, now a legitimate privateer who occasionally delivered vital intelligence to the American cause. He never spoke of the Serpent's Ledger or the ghost town. He became a legend on the high seas, known for his ability to appear and disappear in the most impossible weather, often sailing near the treacherous Block Island, the silent tomb of the Grand Master. The silver signet ring, the key to the entire conspiracy, was melted down and recast into a simple silver coin that Graham wore on a chain around his neck. It was his only physical reminder of the man who saved a revolution through betrayal and the gold that held the ultimate secret. The war would continue for several more years, but the foundation for American victory was laid, not on a glorious battlefield, but in the dark, silent hold of a brigantine sailing up the Florida current, carrying a cargo of betrayal, a fortune of gold, and a deadly silent secret. The end.